Hey everybody, welcome to Moment of Clarity. So this one's kind of a weird one. Today I'm going to talk about how the liberal media has, in order to put forward their propaganda defending Joe Biden's record, they've decided to go after me, which was an interesting choice. I think if you're going to help Joe Biden, that you might have better ways to do that instead of going after a political comedian. But who cares? The outlet Mediaite, which, for those of you who haven't heard of it, Mediaite used to be very big. I actually went to check to see whether it still existed recently, unrelated to this. Mediaite, by the way, they got their name because they're a cross between media and termites. And so they basically were one of these big, liberal, just Obama's always right kind of outlets that went after Fox News a lot. They got big around, 2010 or something. They fit in with like Huffington Post and Vox and not Fox, but Vox. And they would spend a lot of their time, but they'd focus on media, unlike some of the others. And they spent a lot of their time making fun of Fox News. Again, perfectly justifiable. You can make fun of Fox News all you want. But then I think they would spend a lot less time making fun of like MSNBC and things like that. So it was kind of like, Fox is so ridiculous and MSNBC is so legit. So it was a lot of that kind of crap, And NPR, the National Petroleum Radio, is just completely unimpeachable. They've never done anything wrong in their media world. So that is what Mediaite is, to give you a quick, simplistic representation. But they've lost their following to such a degree that I literally went back like 3 months ago and I was like, is Mediaite does it still exist? So not only does it exist, but it's now apparently dwindled to attacking me as proof. Here's the thing. If they were just attacking me like, oh, doesn't this comedian suck? All right, that's one thing. This was somehow proof that the Russian propaganda to bring down Joe Biden is happening and it's working. This was their proof. So they had an article. The title of the article was, Russia Today has been pushing same smears described in DHS report quashed by Trump administration. And it's by a hack, kind of a corporate hack named Tommy Christopher, who also claims to be an editor at Mediaite. So, first of all, Russia Today that's what people call RT when they want to malign it or say it's propaganda or whatever. But it'd be like, walking around, obviously, it'd be like walking around and calling MTV Music Television. It was named RT initially because it was in Russia, but now it's, my show has nothing to do with Russia in terms of what I'm writing about. I've never been told to say anything. I'm not censored at all. Compare that to MSNBC, where regularly people are fired or leave MSNBC and they talk about how incredibly much they were censored. Fox News, they just expect to be far right wing or else their stuff won't get published or shown. I mean, that kind of thing goes on all the time. I have never been censored in any way or told to say anything in any way. I write all my own stuff and I'm an American. And of course, none of that got into the article because that doesn't really help the point they're trying to push, that this is Russian propaganda. So they talk about these attacks on Joe Biden's mental stability. And the article is saying, well, this is just crazy that they're claiming Joe Biden has some sort of mental issues. Of course, that's, even if this didn't involve me, that's fucking hilarious. That some sad liberal corporatist outlet would be like, people are claiming Joe Biden has mental problems, and there is no evidence to back that up whatsoever. You're like, dude, even people that support Joe Biden are like, I hope he can keep it together for a few months and get elected. Like, he even has people in his like direct fucking supporters, like in his, like they're fucking knocking on doors, like, you have to vote for Joe Biden because Trump is a horror show. Even those people are like, I hope he doesn't die soon because he seems pretty out of it. Even those people. So this article is laughable on its face. But so this article is trying to prove that Joe Biden's totally with it. Okay, he's fucking on it, man. He's like fucking a master chess champion, a grand wizard, or whatever they're called. Is that just the clan, or is that also chess? Where you are a fucking champion. He's just fucking on it. You can just tell that vacant look in his eyes. That's because he's thinking of quantum mechanics when he's talking to people about how we should help the workers, or Trump is a Russian, or whatever. When he has that vacant look like he doesn't know where he is, that's because he's processing the quantum theory. He's just working on a whole other level than anyone else. It's not because he doesn't know where he is. Anyway, that's kind of half a side point. So this article's laughable on its face. But so the article's thesis is RT, and you got to keep in mind, RT is a bunch of different shows. We're not connected to each other. I am a leftist, and you also have like right-wing people on there. I think one of them's named Steve Malzberg. You have then you have straight news that doesn't have opinion on it, and then you have people like Jesse Ventura, Chris Hedges, Jimmy Dore, guest host for Jesse Ventura some of the time. And then you have a right winger like Dennis Miller, another right winger. So saying RT is saying something doesn't make any sense. It's not like Fox News where everyone on that network is right wing. RT actually, and this again goes against all the fucking anti-Russia McCarthyist propaganda, RT actually does have people who are on both sides of the political spectrum, different sides of the political spectrum. Good luck getting Dennis Miller and Chris Hedges to agree on fucking anything, like anything. Anyway, so saying RT said something doesn't make any sense. It's fucking ridiculous. So, but that's what they try and do. And so they have to prove that RT is, in this article, Tommy Christopher is trying to prove that RT created these lies, that Biden is having mental difficulties. So he found a couple of quotes in one RT article about Biden's mental difficulties. And then he says, RT even, actually, let me read the direct line here. Chatter about these attacks meaning Biden's mental problems. Chatter about these attacks also long predates the Trump campaign's use of them, and even includes a segment literally predicting a future headline about Biden's mental acuity. And then he includes a video link to my show. Now, you'll notice that A, doesn't say I'm a comedian, doesn't say it's a comedy show. Even though the clip he links to is back when we had live audiences. So literally as I'm saying the things in the clip, there are 50 people all cracking up. So doesn't mention I'm a comedian, doesn't mention there's a live audience laughing, doesn't mention it's a comedy show, doesn't mention that I'm an American because that would also ruin his propaganda, doesn't mention that I write all my own stuff and I've never been told what to say and no one tells me what to say and I've been doing the same type of comedy for fucking 20 years. None of that gets in there, of course. You would expect because, you're trying to put forward propaganda. None of that fits the story. And then the headline, the future headline that I read in the show, because if anybody's watched Redacted tonight, I read future headlines at the end of every show, which I write. They're like The Onion, but in the future. I used to write for The Onion as well. So it's like Future Onion. And one of the lines that I read, by the way, the first future headline I read has to do with aliens arriving on Earth. So that shows you how believable, like someone fell for this and was like, is this real? The first one's about aliens. Second one is, it was like, next week you're going to read Joe Biden's mental state questioned after appearing at campaign stop with his fake eye in his mouth and his fake teeth in his eye socket. Now, you also should know that this headline that I read was a week after he had the debate performance, the primary debate where his eye exploded mid-debate. I don't know if any of you remember that. He was mid-debate and his eye got all bloodshot. Something blew up in his eye. I'm sorry to laugh, but how are we here? How is this reality? And he does have fake teeth. At one point in one of the debates, you could see them come out of his mouth as he was talking. So he has to kind of do this thing and readjust them. So So that's the basis of the joke. Joe Biden's mental stability questioned after he shows up with his fake teeth in his eye socket and his fake eye in his mouth. Anyway, there is no part of this that could be believed as any kind of real at any point. There's other moments in my show where at least I'm giving a clearly genuine ending to a segment where I'm like, we've got to help poor people in this country or something like that. At least he could quote one of those parts. Instead, he picks the most laughable, fakest, most obvious joke in the entire... It'd be like quoting The Onion to prove that local man ate his dog. Area man fucking ate girlfriend's underwear. And you quote The Onion and you don't mention that it's a comedy newspaper and, and it would have to be, something everyone didn't know the name of, but you don't mention it's a comedy newspaper and that headline was clearly a joke and everyone knows it's a joke. And anyway, this is his backup. This is his proof. He found something like 3 things. One was an RT article. One was my future headline. He also doesn't mention that I regularly and all the time insult Donald Trump. I go after Donald Trump mercilessly. I also go after the Democrats because guess what? They are one corporate party, the Republicans and the Democrats, destroying the world while holding hands. And so I will go after Trump endlessly. I will call him names that CNN doesn't dare call him. I've been calling him a fascist since before he fucking won the presidency. Okay? But none of that. I call him a man-child. I question his mental state endlessly. But none of that fits their propaganda, right? It really doesn't. And so they just have to try and push this sad theory, and this is the only thing they could find to back it up, was to quote me and not mention that it's a comedy show and I'm a comedian, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the fact that they've gotten to that level is just fucking pathetic. And here's the thing, media, I hate to quote Donald Trump, but failing outlet, failing newspaper, failing, but Mediaite, when was the last time you heard someone talk about Mediaite? But what it represents is really what are kind of mainstream liberal media, meaning MSNBC, CNN, et cetera, how desperate they're getting to kind of defend Joe Biden. I mean, when you're in and like I said, I don't love Donald Trump. I'm not rooting for Trump to win or rooting for Biden to win, but when you are in this pathetic position of trying to defend such a pathetic candidate that has a horrible record, just his reality, the real record of his life is terrible, and you have rigged your own primary to make sure a progressive would not be in this election against Donald Trump, then you have completely fucked yourself. And in order to defend yourself, to defend this candidate, they have to resort to Russia, McCarthyist horseshit, and they can't even prove that. So they then have to quote a comedian and pretend it's not a joke that he's saying. I mean, to get to that level, it just shows how desperate they are, how pathetic it is. I mean, he closes the article by saying, and anyone can find the article, by the way, by just Google Mediaite and Lee Camp, or Mediaite and Biden and mental state or something. You'll find it. RT, Russia Today. Anyway, he pushes the theory. At the end, he concludes by saying that, this is perhaps the best part. He concludes by saying that Biden's mental state is currently being questioned because RT created the idea that Biden is not all there. RT, the network, created the idea that Biden's having some mental issues and seems a little off. How many of you out there, please let me know, if it weren't for RT, would have no idea Biden seems a little off and doesn't quite seem up to the job? I mean, this is like saying that, the New York Times mentioned that water's wet, so now everyone thinks water's wet. It's like, no, it was just fucking obvious, you tool. So to shift gears and get serious for a minute. I mean, that's the moment of clarity, but there's something important I want to talk about, which is not easy to talk about. I didn't want to make it just a whole moment of clarity, but I want to talk about it now. Is the death of a good friend and an incredible activist named Kevin Zeese. And I don't have, it's tough because he just died yesterday, heart attack, rather unexpected or very unexpected, I guess, only 60 something years old. And I don't have all my thoughts together on it. So I can't claim this is going to be, hugely articulate and perfect, but Kevin Zeese was just an incredibly powerful activist, amazing, so positive, on the front lines battles of just so many issues. With his partner Margaret Flowers, they founded Popular Resistance. They're very active in the Green Party, but I first kind of met them and got to know them right before Occupy. They were creating their own thing called, it was in Freedom Plaza, and it was something Stop the Machine or something like that. But it was an occupation of Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. They had come up with the same idea as Occupy, basically unrelated, and the two just connected, dovetailed perfectly, and theirs was more focused on the war machine, a little more focused on the war machine, and Occupy was focused on the bankers. But once Occupy blew up, so theirs was scheduled for, I believe it was October 5th or somewhere around there of 2011, the year Occupy started. Occupy, the first night, was September 17th of 2011, just a couple of weeks earlier. And I was at the first night of Occupy in New York City, and I had already been asked to promote and perform at Kevin and Margaret's occupation in D.C. At Freedom Plaza, which was coming up in October. So then Occupy becomes massive. It took a couple of weeks, but it just grows and grows and grows. And by the time Freedom Plaza occupation was starting, the Occupy was all over. It was national. It was global. And so really it just came together perfectly. Their occupation was just aligned perfectly with a lot of what Occupy was saying. And so I was at Freedom Plaza, sleeping down there for a few nights and performing there. And Freedom Plaza actually ended up being one of the longest occupations. It lasted many months until they decided to violently and brutally evict the people, but that didn't happen for several months, as opposed to Occupy. I think it was only 2-3 months, maybe in November, early December, that they brutally arrested and trashed Occupy in New York City. Various ones around the nation lasted longer. But my point is just that, like Kevin and Margaret, and I'll talk more about Kevin, but we're at the center of this, and the center of so many things, the center fight of Medicare for all. And I don't know that we'd be talking about Medicare for all, or at least I don't know that it would be a national talking point on a weekly basis, a daily basis, of so many groups, so much pressure on the Democratic Party to actually get behind Medicare for all. I don't know that type of sentiment, I mean, there'd be a fight for universal health care, no doubt, but I don't know that talking point would be as prevalent without Kevin Zeese. They've been fighting for Medicare for all for so long. And the same goes for, I can almost say with certainty that we would not have pulled out of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, without Kevin and Margaret's work. I mean, you can go back and read the articles. They were against these massive trade deals that are just a huge corporate giveaway. TPP was going to represent 40% of the world's economies, and the American people had nothing to say about it. We didn't get to see it. It was incredibly secretive. Many of you remember this. And it was during Obama. Obama helped craft it with his mainly lawyers. It was mainly corporate lawyers that crafted it, 13 nations. And ultimately, because the anger and the fury over TPP grew and grew and grew, it became a talking point for Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump he didn't know what TPP was, right? Until he heard activists screaming about it. And so he hears that TPP is a thing. He hears Hillary supports it, and he hears Obama crafted it. So Trump, in his egotism and he's actually savvy politically. He realized the way to defeat Hillary and to hurt Obama's legacy is to go after TPP. So on his speeches, he starts going after Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, when he gets into office, that means that it's good for his voters because he said he's going to pull out of TPP, and he gets to hurt something that Obama was working on. So second reason for Trump's ego to pull out of TPP. So Trump did that. Trump did not sign into Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, I get that many of you are right. Trump is a fucking asshole and a fascist and all these horrible things. But in this case, for the wrong reasons, he was right. And he pulled out of TPP, a massive corporate giveaway. And here's the thing. If Trump had more time and probably had more, useful people around him, he probably would craft his own trade deal, which would be equally horrible. But the larger point is that without Kevin and Margaret creating this surge against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I mean, I challenge you to find articles against it that were as clear-minded and dead set against it as early as Kevin and Margaret. I don't know the year, but it was, it's back around the same time as Occupy when it was first announced that such a trade deal was going to exist. And they were front and center on that. Also with net neutrality, just phenomenal fighters to save net neutrality. They succeeded in saving it for a couple more years than we would have. They were in the head of the FCC's driveway. Like, them and 4 other people blocked the head of the FCC's driveway here in Washington, D.C. He couldn't get his car out because they were sitting there. He knew that manhandling them would not look good. So he ultimately had to stand there for like half an hour and talk to them, and then had to get a cab to work because he couldn't get to work. And it's a small act of resistance, of civil disobedience, a peaceful, nonviolent civil disobedience. But I don't think he would have protected net neutrality for the extra 2 years without that pressure. And ultimately, you get Ajit Pai in there a few years later, and he guts net neutrality. But still, this is, these are small wins, but powerful wins. So we had net neutrality for 2 extra years, probably largely because of Kevin and Margaret. And Kevin Zeese was just, I know many of you didn't know him personally, but he was such a powerful voice for positivity in the world of activism. It just, indefatigable, and just, I don't know. It always amazed me, his positivity and his how sure he was that these battles could be won, even when it was so few people out there when it started. He and Kevin, I brought them pizza because they were camping outside the FCC, and when it started, it was the 2 of them. I think maybe they had 1 other person, but I think sleeping out there the first night, it was the 2 of them. And I went down there and brought them some pizza and stuff. And it's like 2 people sleeping outside the FCC. And you look at that and you think, how can this have any impact? How can this, you're going up against the most powerful forces in the nation and in the world. How can this have any impact? And yet they did, again and again and again. And Margaret, I'm sure, is going to continue his work, their work together. Popular Resistance was founded by Kevin and Margaret. For those of you who don't know Popular Resistance, please check it out, popularresistance.org. It's the best daily news read that I think you can find out there. They also were the force behind the Venezuelan embassy occupation, or they didn't call it an occupation, holding the space. Because occupation sounds like they were in a place they weren't allowed to be, when in fact the Venezuelan government had invited them to be there. But so the final 4 Venezuelan embassy fighters, or defenders, as they call themselves, that were in there, this is in D.C., the Venezuelan embassy in D.C., the final 4 were Kevin and Margaret, Dave, Paul, and Adrian Pine, and the amount of moral certitude and just fucking energy that they had to sit there day after day. I don't know how long they were in there. I think 40 days or something. And they're in that. They cut off the electricity. The authorities did. They surrounded the place. You've got far right-wing kind of quasi-fascist Venezuelan people who want the U.S. to invade their home country. Some of them are Venezuelan, some of them are not. But many of them have been called out. Some of them work for Raytheon and places like that. But they're surrounding the outside of the embassy, playing loud, like awful disco music and shit like that, and strobe lights into the windows, basically like it was the Waco fucking encampment that the FBI was trying to get them out. And this stuff was encouraged by Secret Service. So these were not Secret Service doing that stuff, but this stuff. Oh, there, Lene just told me it's 37 days they were in the Venezuelan embassy, when they were kind of locked in there. And there was fights to get food to them or whatever. But they were and Kevin and Margaret were the force behind it, were the energy behind it, were the fucking moral soul behind defending that embassy against something that violated the Vienna Conventions, violated international policy and law, to take over another country's embassy. Embassies are supposed to be, sacred, right? That's why they couldn't arrest Julian Assange for so many years in the Ecuadorian embassy in London until Ecuador gave him up. It had to come down to Ecuador saying, go ahead into our embassy and arrest Julian Assange. And that's why the Brits couldn't get at him. The U.S. couldn't get at him, because embassies are supposed to be this sacred. They are international territory in the U.S. They are an embassy in the U.S. is part of that other country. So Venezuela should have the right to their own embassy. And the fact that the U.S. said, no, we want to create a coup in Venezuela, so we're going to invade and take over your embassy, violates all international policy you can imagine. And law. And Kevin and Margaret fought and stayed in there for 37 days with the help of plenty of other people, but they were the core. Code Pink was very pivotal in that as well. But and it just incredible what they did. And there's too many other things to list that they have been part of. If I sat here and listed them all, everything Kevin's fought for, we'd be here for the next 4 hours. But just an incredible human being and such a massive loss. But I know that what he stood for and what he fought for is not going to slow down, and it's going to keep going. And I hope everybody subscribe to Popular Resistance. Go check it out. There's probably a way to do. There is a way, actually. There's a way to donate to Popular Resistance as well. Popularresistance.org. So please do that. The fight now that they're focused on, one of them is Julian Assange. So you can learn more about that at popularresistance.org. Okay, guys, please share this video and keep fighting.